The restaurant goes quiet the moment Hyun-soo walks in. Not the polite quiet of a room that notices someone important. The specific quiet that falls when people who understand danger recognize it before they can name it. Chairs stop scraping. Conversations drop to murmurs. Even the kitchen, through the pass, seems to hold its breath. Archer is one of Manhattan's most discreet dining rooms. Dark wood, low lighting, white linen. The kind of place where the staff are trained to be invisible and the guests are trained to be expensive. Hyun-soo has owned it for 3 years. He has never once eaten here. He walks through the dining room the way he walks through everything, like the room rearranged itself before he arrived, and he is simply moving through the space it made for him. He stops at the bar. There is a woman behind it he has never seen before. She is not the regular bartender. She is not anyone he recognizes from the staff while Soren pulls every quarter. She is setting up for the evening service, slicing citrus, arranging glasses, moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone who has done this long enough that it lives in her hands rather than her head. She hasn't looked up. She hasn't registered the quiet that came in with him. She is simply working in the specific way people work when they are somewhere they feel they have every right to be. Hyun-soo looks at Soren. Soren checks his phone. Temp cover, he says quietly. Elena called in sick. Agency sent her this afternoon. Her name is... I don't need her name, Hyun-soo says. I need her gone. He does not say it loudly. He doesn't need to. He walks to the bar and stands on the other side of it and waits until she looks up. She does, after finishing the cut she was making, which takes 4 more seconds, which is 4 seconds longer than anyone else in this building would have made him wait. Her eyes are direct. Her expression is neutral. She looks at him the way she looks at the citrus she just finished slicing, with full attention and no particular alarm. I need you to leave, he says. She sets down the knife. She looks at him for a moment, not sizing him up, not calculating, just looking, the way you look at something you are trying to understand accurately. Then she says, I was sent here to cover a shift. The shift ends at midnight. It's 6:45. I'm aware of the time, he says. Then you know I have over 5 hours of work left, she says. And a dining room that opens in 15 minutes. He looks at her. In his world, in every room he has ever stood in, this is the moment people fold. This is the moment they find a reason to agree with him, to rephrase it as their own idea, to make the exit look like a choice rather than a retreat. Nobody pushes back. Not twice. Not even once, if they know who he is. She picks the knife back up. She goes back to the citrus. And Hyun-soo, who has not been surprised by a person in longer than he can remember, stands at his own bar and feels something shift in the specific way that things shift when they cannot be unshifted. He doesn't leave. Neither does she. And that, Soren will say later, is where it all began. Zara Wells learned early that the most dangerous thing a woman in her position could do was flinch. Not because flinching was weak. It wasn't. It was human. But because in the specific world she moved through, flinching gave people permission to keep pushing. She had been a waitress and bartender in Manhattan for 7 years. She had worked hotel bars where finance men thought a $100 tip bought them something it didn't. She had worked rooftop restaurants where the view was the product and the staff were furniture. She had worked brunch shifts that lasted 6 hours and left her with tips that didn't cover her subway fare and a smile that cost her more than anyone in that room would ever understand. She was 29. She had a studio apartment in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, that she shared with a cat named Earl who knocked things off surfaces deliberately and without remorse. She had a degree in accounting she had never used because the job she'd been hired for out of college dissolved 3 months after she started, and the student loan payments didn't dissolve with it. She had a mother in Hartford, Connecticut, who called every Sunday and asked when Zara was going to do something with her life, by which she meant something that looked like the life she had expected for her daughter. Zara had stopped being angry about any of this approximately 2 years ago. She had replaced anger with something more useful, which was precision. She knew exactly what she was doing, why she was doing it, and how long she intended to keep doing it. She was saving, not vaguely, not optimistically, with a spreadsheet and a timeline and a specific number that meant she could open the kind of bar she had been designing in her head for 4 years. Small, curated, the kind of place where the drinks were honest and the lighting was right and nobody treated the staff like furniture. She was 11 months from that number when the agency called about the Archer shift. $400 for one evening. Cash. She took it. She had looked up Archer before she arrived, the way she looked up every venue. Checked the reviews, noted the clientele, mapped the bar layout from photographs, identified the house pours. She had not found anything about the owner because the owner's name was not attached to anything public, which was unusual for a restaurant of this caliber, in which she had noted and filed under none of your business and moved on. She arrived at 5:30. She prepped the bar. She learned the menu in 40 minutes, which was faster than the sous chef expected and faster than she bothered to mention. She was slicing citrus at 6:45 when a man walked in, and the restaurant went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the dining room filling up. She finished the cut before she looked up. She was not going to rush a knife for a room's nerves. And when she looked up and he told her to leave, she felt, beneath the neutral expression she had spent years perfecting, exactly one thing. Not fear, not the urge to comply. The specific, familiar, bone-deep exhaustion of being a woman in a room who is asked to make herself smaller so a man can feel larger. She picked the knife back up. She had 11 months left on her timeline. She was not going anywhere. Hyun-soo did not stay for the service. He had not planned to stay at all. He had come to Archer to collect a document from the restaurant's safe that he preferred not to have delivered, and the woman behind the bar was a complication he had not anticipated and would have resolved in 30 seconds with anyone else. He sat at the corner table near the kitchen pass where he could see the whole room without being part of it, and Soren set the document in front of him, and Hyun-soo opened it and read exactly none of it. He watched her work instead. She was good. That was the first honest assessment. She was simply very good at what she was doing. She remembered every order without writing most of them down. She knew when a glass needed refilling before the person sitting in front of it knew. She moved through the bar with the kind of economy that comes from years of doing something in small spaces. No wasted movement, no unnecessary reach. Everything exactly where it needed to be before she needed it. Jade, the regular waitress working the floor, came to the bar 3 times in the first hour, and each time Zara had the order ready before Jade finished asking. The dining room that had gone quiet when he walked in had warmed up again. People were laughing. A couple near the window looked like they were having the best night of their month. The man at table 4 had ordered a second drink 20 minutes earlier than people usually ordered second drinks, which meant something about the pour or the conversation was doing something right. Hyun-soo looked at the document in front of him. He looked back at the bar. Soren was watching him the way Soren always watched him when something was happening that Soren did not yet have language for. He said nothing because he had worked beside Hyun-soo for 8 years and he understood that certain silences were not invitations. At 9:15, a man at the bar became difficult. Not violently, just in the specific way that men who have had 3 drinks and feel overlooked become difficult. He clicked his fingers twice. He said something to Zara that Hyun-soo could not hear from across the room. What he could see was her expression. It did not change. She set the drink she was making down on the mat in front of the man, looked at him with the same level directness she had turned on Hyun-soo 3 hours earlier, and said something that made the man pick up his drink, straighten his jacket, and face forward without another word. Hyun-soo looked at Soren. What did she say to him? Soren almost smiled. She told him the bar was not a place for that kind of conversation, and that she'd be happy to call him a car if the evening wasn't going the way he'd hoped. Hyun-soo looked back at the bar. She was already making the next order. She had not looked in his direction once since 6:45. He folded the document. He put it in his jacket. He ordered a drink. Chairman Jean called at 10:47 that night. Hyun-soo was still at the corner table. He stepped outside to take the call, onto the narrow side street where Archer's kitchen exhaust hummed and the city smelled of November and cold stone, and listened to his father's voice the way he had been listening to it since he was old enough to understand what it meant when that voice used that particular tone. Chairman Jean did not ask questions. He stated things. He stated that the Flushing negotiation needed to close before the end of the month. He stated that the Washington contacts were becoming impatient. He stated that Hyunsu's presence at a dinner in 2 weeks was not optional. He stated all of this in the measured cadence of a man who has never once in his life needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. And then he was finished, and the call ended, and Hyunsu stood on the side street and felt the familiar weight of his father's world settle back across his shoulders like a coat he had been wearing so long he sometimes forgot it wasn't his own skin. He was 34 years old. He had been running the New York operation since he was 27. He had never wanted it. That was the fact nobody in his world was permitted to say out loud, least of all him. He had grown up watching his father build something that consumed everyone it touched, that made men powerful and then made them hollow, that required a specific kind of person to maintain and produced a specific kind of person in the maintaining. He had become that person with such efficiency that some days he could not remember who he had been before. He went back inside. She was clearing the bar for the end of service. It was nearly midnight. The dining room was emptying, couples settling bills, the kitchen going quiet in stages. She was washing glasses with the same focused attention she had brought to every other task, and the bar looked exactly as it had at 6:30, as if the whole evening had passed through it without leaving a mark. He sat back down at the corner table. Soren raised his eyebrows, said nothing. At midnight exactly, Zura untied her apron. She folded it on the bar. She said something to Jade that made Jade laugh. A real laugh, quick and unguarded. She picked up her bag from the shelf under the bar. She looked around the dining room once, checking, the way professionals check, making sure everything was in order before she left it. Her eyes passed over his corner table the way they passed over everything else in the room, with full attention and no particular weight. She walked to the door. She did not look back. Hyunsu sat in the corner of his own restaurant and understood, with a clarity that was almost uncomfortable, that the most dangerous thing that had happened to him this year had nothing to do with Washington or Flushing or his father's phone calls. He called the agency in the morning. Soren made the call, the way Soren made all calls that needed to be untraceable to Hyunsu's direct line, and the message was simple. The cover worked well. Send her again if Elena is unavailable. It was phrased as an operational decision. It was filed under staffing. Neither of them said anything about it once the call was done. Elena was unavailable the following Thursday. Zara arrived at 5:30. Same time. She prepped the bar with the same systematic focus, checked the stock, noted the gaps, reorganized 2 things that the daytime barback had put back in the wrong place. She did not seem surprised to be back. She did not seem particularly pleased either. She seemed, as far as Hyunsu could tell from the corner table he had again taken without explanation, exactly as present and exactly as unbothered as she had been the first time. He had not told Soren why he wanted her back. He was not entirely sure he could have explained it accurately. What he knew was this: in a world built entirely on performance, on reading people, calculating their motivations, anticipating the gap between what they presented and what they actually wanted, she was the first person he had encountered in years who seemed to be presenting nothing, not hiding something, not performing confidence, not managing his impression of her, simply existing in a room with the full, grounded ease of someone who has nothing to prove and has made a private and permanent peace with that fact. It was, in a world of mirrors, like finding something that cast an actual shadow. Jade noticed on the second Thursday. She said nothing to Zara. Jade was perceptive in the specific way people who work restaurant floors become perceptive, which is to say she noticed everything and disclosed selectively. But she mentioned it to the kitchen manager the following morning, and the kitchen manager mentioned it to nobody, because in this particular restaurant, discretion was not a policy. It was a survival instinct. On the third Thursday, Zara looked up from the bar at 9 o'clock and found Hyunsu standing on the other side of it. Not sitting at the corner table. Standing at the bar. He had not ordered anything. He was simply there, in the way that he was always simply there, fully present, completely still, taking up exactly the space he occupied and not performing any of it. She looked at him. "Drink," she said. "Water," he said. She poured it. She set it in front of him. She went back to the order she was making. He drank the water. He stayed for 40 minutes. He left without saying anything else. But the water glass, Jade noticed when she came to clear the bar later, had been moved. Not far, just slightly. The way you move something you have been holding without meaning to hold it. Jade picked it up and said nothing and thought quite a lot. By the fourth Thursday, Zara had made a decision. Not about him. She was precise about that in her own mind. About the information she was now carrying and what she intended to do with it. She knew who Hyunsu was. She had known since the second week. A combination of things she had overheard. Things Jade had said carefully without saying directly, and a single search on her phone in the subway home that had returned results thin enough to be deliberate and alarming enough to be sufficient. She knew what his name meant in this city. She knew what the quiet that entered rooms with him actually was. She had not run. She had also not been naive about the reason. She examined it the way she examined everything, without flinching, without flattery. He had not threatened her. He had not leveraged anything. He came to his own restaurant on Thursday evenings, sat in a corner, drank water at the bar for 40 minutes, and left. That was the sum of his behavior, and it was, by any honest accounting, less troubling than half the men who sat on the other side of her bar and thought their money gave them rights it didn't. What she had not anticipated was the conversation. It started on the fourth Thursday, at 9:20, when he came to the bar and she poured the water without being asked, and he said, "How long have you been doing this?" She looked at him. 7 years. In New York? All of it. He was quiet for a moment. "You don't seem like someone who planned to be here this long." She set down the glass she was drying. She looked at him directly. "What does that person look like?" He thought about it. Actually thought. Not the pause people use when they want to seem considered, but the pause of someone genuinely running the question through. "Like someone with a plan that involves a different room," he said. She almost smiled. She did not let herself. 11 months, she said. "Give or take." He looked at her. "Until what?" "Until the room I'm building is ready," she said. And she picked up the next glass and dried it and moved on, because she was not in the habit of offering more than was asked for, and she had already offered more than she intended. He stayed for an hour that night. He asked 3 more questions about the bar she was building, what kind, where, what she meant by honest drinks, and she answered all of them with the same measured precision she brought to everything. She did not ask him anything back, not because she wasn't curious, because she understood that some doors, once opened, changed the architecture of a room permanently, and she was not yet sure she wanted to live in the room that conversation would build. What she did not know was that 3 tables away, a man with a glass of wine he had barely touched had been watching the bar for the last 40 minutes. Not the bar, the conversation. And when Hyunsu left at 10:30, this man made a call from his car and said 6 words that would change everything. "He is attached to the girl." Chairman Jean did not move quickly. That was his particular power, the patience of a man who understood that timing was not about speed, but about the exact right moment, and that the exact right moment was always the one when the other person believed they were safe. He gathered information the way he gathered everything, thoroughly, quietly, without leaving marks. Within 48 hours of that phone call, he knew Zara's full name, her address in Crown Heights, her agency, her mother's address in Hartford. He knew about the studio apartment, and the cat named Earl, and the spreadsheet, and the timeline, and the specific number she was 11 months away from reaching. He knew exactly what she was building toward, and he knew exactly what it would cost her if someone decided to make it difficult. He did not contact Hyunsu. Not yet. He contacted someone else first, a man named David Seo who managed the agency that had sent Zara to Archer and who had been doing quiet business with Chairman Jean for 6 years in the specific way that certain people in certain positions do business, with mutual understanding and no paper trail. The conversation lasted for minutes. After it ended, David Co. made a notation in his system that Zara Wells was not available for further Archer placements. No reason given. No appeal process. Just unavailable. On the fifth Thursday, she did not come. A different woman arrived. Competent, professional, entirely unremarkable. Hyunsu sat at the corner table and knew within 10 minutes what had happened and knew within 20 minutes who had happened it. He said nothing. He folded his hands on the table and finished the meal he had ordered for the first time in 3 years of owning this restaurant and tasted none of it. Soren, sitting across from him, understood the silence completely and did not interrupt it. On Friday morning, Hyunsu arrived at Archer before the lunch service. He went to the bar and stood behind it, the place she had stood every Thursday for 4 weeks, and looked at the dining room from that angle. The lower elevation. The sightlines that required you to look up slightly to see the whole room. The position that made you visible but not central, present but peripheral. He stood there for a full minute. Then he picked up his phone and called Soren and said, "I need her found." "Already working on it," Soren said. "Don't approach her," Hyunsu said. "Don't send anyone to her door. Don't put anyone in her space. I need to know where she is, and I need her to be the one who decides what happens next." Soren was quiet for a moment. "That's not usually how we handle things." "I know," Hyunsu said. "Do it anyway." He hung up. He stepped out from behind the bar. He straightened his jacket. He looked at the restaurant, his room, everything arranged exactly as he required, and felt, for the first time in longer than he could name, that something in it was missing. Zara found out on a Friday afternoon. She had called the agency about 2 upcoming shifts, a hotel bar in Midtown she had worked twice before, and another Archer placement she had not requested but had assumed would be offered again. David Co. told her the Midtown shift was confirmed. He told her Archer had made a change in their coverage arrangement. He said it the way people say things when they have been told to say them, smoothly, without hesitation, which was itself the tell. She thanked him and hung up and sat in her Crown Heights apartment with Earl on the table in front of her looking at her the way cats look at things when they have no useful input but intend to be present anyway. She ran the information. Someone had removed her from Archer's rotation deliberately. The agency had not done it independently. David Co. was not a man who made unilateral decisions about placement. She had worked with him long enough to know that. Which meant someone with reach into the agency had made the call. Which meant someone connected to Archer. She thought about the man who had told her to leave on the first night. She thought about everything she had looked up in the subway 2 weeks ago. She thought about a conversation about honest drinks and a timeline and the way he had listened when she talked. Not performing attention, but actually holding the information, turning it over, treating it as something that mattered. She thought about the phone call that had pulled the placement. She sat with all of it for a long time. Then she did something she had not planned and could not have predicted she would do. She took out the card that had appeared under the bar's mat on the 3rd Thursday, small, white, a phone number in clean printed digits, no name, and she looked at it for a moment. She had found it during cleanup. She had not thrown it away. She had not let herself examine why she hadn't thrown it away. She examined it now. She picked up her phone. She dialed. He answered before the second ring. He said nothing, just the line opening, his presence on the other end of it, waiting. "Someone called the agency," she said. "I've been removed from the Archer rotation." "I know," he said. "Was it you?" A pause. "No. But you know who it was." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Earl knocked a pen off the table. She watched it fall. "I want to understand something," she said. "The first night, you told me to leave." "Yes," he said. "And I didn't." "No," he said. "You didn't. And now someone who is not you has removed me from the building anyway." "Yes," he said. She exhaled slowly. "That's a problem," she said. "I know," he said. "Not for the reasons you think," she said. "I have 11 months on a timeline. I can't afford someone with reach into my agency deciding I'm inconvenient. That affects more than Archer." He was very quiet. Then he said, "I will handle it." "I didn't call you to ask you to handle it," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm going to handle it anyway." What happened between Hyun-soo and his father was not a confrontation. It was a reckoning, which is a different thing. A confrontation has heat. A reckoning has clarity. Hyun-soo drove to the townhouse in the West Village where Chairman Jean conducted his quieter business on Saturday morning, and he sat across from his father in the room that smelled of green tea and old paper and said everything he needed to say without raising his voice once. He said, "You reached outside this operation to interfere with a civilian." He said, "You used a contact I built to remove someone I had chosen to keep in my space." He said, "You made a decision that was mine to make, and you made it without telling me, and you made it in a direction I would not have chosen." He said all of this in the same measured cadence his father had spent 20 years teaching him, which was, he understood now, sitting in this room, the most complete act of defiance available to him. Chairman Jean listened. He was very still the way old, powerful men are still, not because they are calm, but because they have learned that stillness reads as power, and they have been performing it for so long it has become indistinguishable from the real thing. When Hyun-soo finished, Chairman Jean said, "She is a distraction. She is none of your business," Hyun-soo said. The room was very quiet. Outside, the West Village moved through its Saturday morning. Coffee shops, dog walkers, the particular soft noise of a city that has not yet fully woken up. "Everything in your life is my business," Chairman Jean said. That was the arrangement. The arrangement, Hyun-soo said, is under revision. He left 20 minutes later. He did not slam the door. He did not make any gesture that could be read as drama. He walked to his car and told Soren to restore Zara's placement status at Archer, not through David Seo, through a direct conversation with the restaurant management that required no agency involvement at all. He told Soren to make sure Chairman Jin's access to staffing decisions at any of his properties was quietly and permanently closed. He told Soren to make sure Zara's other agency placements were untouched and that nothing from his father's network could reach her timeline. Then he drove to Crown Heights. He sat in the car outside her building for a while. He had not called ahead. He understood the risk of that. She was a woman who valued her own space and her own decisions, and arriving without invitation was exactly the kind of move she would read clearly and correctly. He also understood that some things needed to be done in person because they were too important to be managed through a phone, and because he had spent 7 years managing everything at a distance, and he was done with the distance. He buzzed her apartment. Her voice came through the intercom. "Who is it?" "Hyun-soo," he said. A pause. Longer than he expected. Shorter than he feared. The door buzzed open. Her apartment was exactly what he had imagined and nothing like what he was used to. Small. Warm. A bookshelf that covered one entire wall from floor to ceiling. Packed in the way bookshelves get packed when the person filling them has been doing it for years without apology. Plants on every windowsill. A drafting table in the corner covered with drawings and notes, and a large piece of paper that looked like a floor plan. Earl regarded him from the kitchen counter with the profound indifference of a creature who has decided that guests are not his department. She was standing in the middle of the room with her arms crossed, not defensively, just the way people stand when they are containing something they have not yet decided how to release. She was in the specific outfit of a person's Saturday morning. Old sweater, no shoes, her hair loose in a way he had not seen before. She looked, in this room, completely and entirely herself. Not the composed professional behind the bar. Not the woman with the level gaze and the neutral expression. Just her, in her space, on her terms. He looked at the floor plan on the drafting table. "Is that the bar?" he said. "Yes," she said. He walked over to it. He looked at it properly. The layout, the flow, the placement of the bar itself in relation to the seating, the note in the corner about lighting. He looked at it the way she had looked at the citrus on the first night, with full attention and no performance. "The bar is too central," he said. She looked at him. "I know," she said. "I keep moving it." He looked at her. She looked back. And something passed between them in the small, warm apartment on a Saturday morning in Crown Heights. Not a declaration, not a performance. Just the specific recognition between two people who have been paying close attention to each other for weeks and have run out of reasons to pretend they haven't. "My father will not interfere again," he said. Your agency is clear. Your placements are protected. Your timeline is yours. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't ask you to fix it, she said. I know, he said. Some things I'm going to do anyway. That's going to be a recurring issue, she said. Probably, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the floor plan. Then she looked at him again. There's coffee, she said. It's on the counter. He found the counter. He found the cups. He poured two without asking which one was hers because he had spent enough Thursday evenings watching her to know which hand she favored and which side of the bar she always moved to when she needed a moment to think. He handed her the right cup. She took it without comment. But the corner of her mouth did something small and involuntary that she did not control in time. And he saw it. And he said nothing. And he sat down at the drafting table and looked at the floor plan and said, "The bar should go here." He pointed. Better sight lines. Natural flow from the entrance. People will settle faster. She came and stood beside him. She looked at where he was pointing. I know, she said quietly. I just wasn't ready to commit to it. He looked up at her. She was looking at the floor plan, not at him, but her shoulder was 3 inches from his and the apartment was warm and outside Brooklyn moved through its Saturday unhurried and completely unbothered by two people standing over a floor plan finally deciding where things should go. Sometimes, he said, the right answer is the one you already know. She looked at him then. Really looked. The same look she had given him on the very first night. Direct, level, assessing him accurately and without alarm. And this time she let herself smile. Not wide, not performed, just real, the way things are real when they have been earned. You told me to leave, she said. I know, he said. First thing you ever said to me. I know, he said. And I didn't, she said. He looked at her. No, he said. You didn't. She picked up her coffee. She looked at the floor plan. She took the pencil from the table and moved the bar, one clean line, decisive, the position he had pointed to, and stepped back and looked at it. Better, she said. Yes, he said. Outside, New York did what New York always does, moved, relentlessly, loudly, without pausing for anyone. But inside a small, warm apartment in Crown Heights, something had been decided. Not dramatically, not with noise. The way real things get decided, quietly, between two people who have finally stopped pretending they don't already know. If this story found you, subscribe and turn on your notifications, because the next one is already written and waiting. Drop a comment and tell me, which moment stopped you? Was it the first night when she picked the knife back up? The water glass that moved? Or the floor plan and where the bar should go? And tell me this, should the next story be Jade's? Because she watched every Thursday and said nothing and has been carrying something of her own for a long time. Or should we find out what Chairman Gene was really protecting and what revision of the arrangement is going to cost him? You decide. I'll be here.